Hello and welcome to Dialogue. The 2022 FIFA World Cup has kicked off in Qatar, which is making history as the smallest country and the first Arab nation to ever host the world's biggest sporting event. How has Qatar prepared for the international tournament? What has been the controversies surrounding the event? And during this period of divergence and global tensions, can sports play a role in uniting the world? To discuss these issues and more, I'm glad to be joined by Dong Jun, co-founder and CEO of EI China Limited, Einar Tangen, independent current affairs commentator, and Professor Gao Luft, co-director at Institute for the Analysis of Global Security. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. Welcome to the discussion, gentlemen. Dong Jun, I will start with you. Probably, the cost of this World Cup, $220 billion, the most expensive one. But people say it has a lot to do with the national development of Qatar and their efforts of modernization. So it's worthwhile.
Yes, I think in today's world, from the Olympic Games and even the Winter Games to the World Cup, such mega or supersized sporting events are every time they bring us to this topic. Is it worth a huge investment? And what's the big picture? I mean, the one bigger than the tournament itself. And what's on the mind for the host country or city for years, many years down the road, instead of recouping your investment for one single event within that physical year or within the next specified 3 to 5 years. And what, financially does it make, like a sound choice or decision? It's still being discussed heatedly and debated, but, 22 billion, that will make it the most expensive, far more expensive than any of a previous edition of the World Cup, or even more than the combined several editions of the most recent World Cup tournaments. But based on limited sources, we still wait for more details to figure out. And I'm not 100% sure that sometime we will have the exact statistics. But obviously, Qatar is determined. Qatar knows what it is doing. And Qatar claims that the tournament will help create a lot of jobs, maybe 1.5 million immediately now, and even more than 4% of GDP growth every year from now all the way to 2030. And that's officially claimed by the host nation. But can that be verified by independent third party? We don't know yet.
Mm-hmm. Gao, so you are close to Qatar in the sense geographically. Should people have a problem with Qatar being one of the richest nations spending the most on the World Cup?
Well, I think that it's not really, it's sort of watered down the river. It's really, we are beyond that point. The money has been spent. Qatar's main source of income is LNG. There is a huge demand for LNG now, especially with everything happening with Russia. Qatar's economic future is guaranteed, at least as long as people need natural gas and gas-derived products. We don't have to worry about Qatar. It's a very tiny country. There are only 3 million people. They did what they did for reasons not necessarily of sport, but of prestige. It's the first Muslim country to host a major sporting event. That's a huge thing for them. By the way, let's not forget that the decision to award them with the games happened 12 years ago. And out of those 12 years, 5 years, this country was under siege, literally diplomatic and physical siege by its neighbors, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain. So imagine to yourself, you have to prepare for this auspicious event while you are not sure how you can even import your food. Well, luckily that siege ended, and now the relations are stable. But Qatar has been through a very rough ride. It has, in a way, in retrospect, may have punched a little bit above its weight. But we are where we are now, and now all we have to do is hope that the games will be successful and that everybody enjoys.
Mm-hmm. Well, Anna, as Gal pointed out, this is the first time for a Muslim country or Arab country to have the World Cup in the Middle East here. And 12 years ago, it won the right to host this tournament. But since then, actually, over the past 12 years, we have seen controversies, after controversies over the hosting right and over the nation. What has, why is so much controversy surrounding this big event?
Well, I think there's a number of things. First, I mean, there are physical obstacles. The Qatar is extremely hot. They were going to do it in the summer. They changed it to accommodate that. There's a physical building of all these facilities. They built 8 stadiums. Well, not completely built. Some of them were enlarged. But there's also a little hint in my mind of racism. This idea that somehow, the Arabs, what are they going to do? Can we trust them? They can't get along with each other. They're squabbling and things like that. And some of that was pointed to, as Gal pointed out, when they were under siege for 5 years. So there were a lot of controversies. The issue is they got through all of them. All of the naysayers, everybody said, oh, it's not going to happen, or, it won't go off the way it would go off in a European country. Not that that has been very exemplary, given some of the performances with the Olympics and things like that. In England, they didn't quite finish a number of the venues, and things were kind of last minute. But right now, the games have become, like the Olympic Games, geopolitical statements. This is really Qatar's coming out statement. They're really putting out there to the world that they may be a small country, they may be, have a high GDP, but they want to be known for something other than just having oil and sand. And a lot of that pushes towards tourism. And, as I said, they project 4%. Almost all of that is going to come from tourism, but they're also looking for industry. They want to attract people. They have a very pleasant environment. If you can, kind of get around the heat, they have air conditioning. Obviously, the energy is not an issue. But, they're trying to look very much forward. How to anticipate when your carbon resources run out. And you're not in demand. How do you build an economy in a part of the world which, quite frankly, is going to suffer more and more from global warming? So they're trying to figure out how to do this. They created a plan. Qatar Airways is legendary. It's just an incredibly welcoming, very well run airline, and that was all part of these pieces that they were putting together to create what they hope will be a large amount of starting with tourism, then having people say, well, this is a great place not only to visit, but perhaps to live, and there are economic opportunities there. So we'll have to see how that works out. But just keep in mind, the price tag was really about national pride. Last night, the ambassador of Qatar to China made a point of saying to about 80 ambassadors who attended the opening to say, look, this is not for Qatar. This is for the Arab world. This is the first time that we have done this. We really are taking our own place in the world. We're no longer a colonial vestige to be pushed around, or just an oil barrel that is looked at in terms of economics. We want to be considered, part of the world system, and somebody and a group that can contribute.
Hmm. Well, Dong Jun, obviously, we say there's a principle, separation for sports and politics, sports and other kinds of issues, diplomatic, politics, human rights issue. But here, obviously, this nation, I mean, Qatar, however small, they are trying very hard to be a good host. They want to present a very strong and a positive image of their nation to the international system. Nothing wrong with that, I would say. But still, you do see there's a lot of questioning, mostly from a Western side about basically everything about this country. What do you make of that? Like sports and politics is somehow we try to separate, but somehow it's always intertwined there.
Yeah, Qingduo, thank you for the question. I think for people, including sports fans like me in East Asia, within the continent of Asia, we are by no means totally unfamiliar about what Qatar can do for sports. Of course, the World Cup is completely different from any other sporting event except for the Olympics. Qatar has been known in Asia to be very active hosting sporting events for decades. I think that represents the country's kind of strategic positioning for itself. It's even more active in terms of sports events hosting than some of its neighbors. And yeah, when it comes to geopolitical background, it actually reminds me, if you don't mind, that Qatar appeared to be an alternative or a competitor if China decided to bid, because that was a term for an Asian nation to host the World Cup when FIFA did that bid choosing process, but China decided to skip it out of several reasons without disclosing them exactly. But one major argument among those Chinese who would vote against the idea of bidding for the World Cup, competing against Qatar, was our national team what if our national team wouldn't be good enough? What I mean is, even if China has successfully won that bid to replace Qatar to host the World Cup today, I think we will be faced with similar questions. I don't mean that those issues now, which have been raised over the recent years by Western media and other political parties and people in the world, in international community, are unfounded. And of course, something did happen. But yes, it is a very heated debate in the international sporting community, especially this year, from the Winter Olympics in Beijing to through all the months when there was a conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and a lot of sporting events have been affected by such issues. We don't see any Russian team in this World Cup. So yes, I think as long as the international owners of such big influential tournament to face the choice of having to expand, or you face an issue of survival, and then you keep your mega size, and you need to work with a host nation or city, large enough, wealthy enough, and also courageous enough to put it together, and then such issues will come about.
Well, speak of the controversies, let's focus a little bit on some of them. Gao, 2 days before the opening, and then there's a ban of the alcohol inside the stadium. How big issue is that?
It depends for whom, not for me. But I think that decision to impose this partial ban, it's not a full ban because there's still alcohol for sale in many, many locations. It's just not everywhere. But I think some people think that the timing of this decision was a little bit out of place, because people have made their choices based on a certain understanding, and now sort of changing the rules of the game at the last minute. But I would say that behind this, there's a very important point that I want to highlight here. A lot of what we hear and see about these games have to do with fights in the family, okay, of the Muslim countries. Let's not forget that the biggest critics of Qatar throughout this process, including those that sort of leaked all kind of information and to the press about this, actually came from the region itself. You know, many of the Arab countries, particularly countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, you know, they're very much opposed to Qatar hosting these games. They said, who are they? You know, how dare they? How can a small country like this claim this fame? And, you know, I think that this alcohol ban has much to do with internal politics of the Muslim world. All of a sudden, various clerics coming out and saying that Qatar is not Muslim enough, it's not religious enough, it's not observant enough, it's not this, it's not that. And that builds some internal pressures. This is not a happy family. The Arab world has never been a happy family, and there's been a lot of infighting and jealousies. Just an anecdote. We've just a few weeks ago heard a very peculiar announcement. The Asian Games 2029, that's what, 6 years from now, will be hosted in a city in Saudi Arabia that doesn't even exist. It hasn't been built yet. And so, you know, the Qataris got a major sporting event, so the Saudis feel that they need to step up too. And before we know it, it'll probably be in UAE and other places. So we're going to hear a lot of very strange things happening out of this region when it comes to sporting event. And now they're going to race to meet the deadline so that they can host this Neom, this new city.
Well, Aina, just like Gao said, you know, inside a family, there's a competition, there's jealousy. Seems like a business as usual. But if you see the world as a big family, there are some more probably serious accusations, I would say, in terms of human rights, for example, from mostly the developed world there. And there's a strong response by FIFA, the president, obviously. You know, his idea is like we need to engage, we need to change. It takes time, and you know, the West European countries probably are not really in a position to lecture Qatar in this issue, and so it makes people, you know, question and of course think, you know, about this issue. Like there are differences obviously among different countries, different values, different practices, but how should we approach, you know, issues like these?
Well, you know, Gal, I respect you and I understood your point, but you know, you illustrate exactly the kind of things that I think are wrong. You know, you could have been describing Europe in terms of jealousies, fighting within the family, et cetera, et cetera. Yet you didn't. You didn't say that they're like everybody else. You said, oh, these Arabs, you know, they're kind of funny and they have all these ideas that they have too much money and who knows if they're going to follow through. Well, that was exactly what was said 12 years ago. It was said when they were under siege. I think you have to, you know, the world is a large place. We can't insist that there's only one solution and that it has to follow some sort of pattern that we've dictated. You know, and that's why there's a lot of people saying it's hypocritical. In terms of the alcohol issue, quite frankly, you know, they want to make it a family event. They are bringing their children and wives. Now, we've seen what happens in Europe and South America and other places when you get these football fans together, let them get drunk, and then they proceed to battle each other and anyone else to do it. There's destruction of property. You have to use policemen to guide them. Is that a family-oriented type of scenario? Or would it make sense to say, look, you guys, if you want to drink, you can drink responsibly at places that are designated, but you're not going to take your drunkenness and your anger out onto the field and or after the game or before the game and start beating people up. So I really don't understand this thing. Oh, well, it's all about hidden agendas and stuff like that. Yeah, there's always a struggle between different cultures, but I think it's wrong to just generalize about that. And in terms of all of these issues, it is Sepp Blattner has come out, although he's been discredited. He was the one who awarded the cup to them. Now he's coming out and going against it, and that elicited a very angry response from the current president, who is trying to clean up all the issues that were within FIFA, which is, after all, a European entity who's going to walk away with $8 billion in their pocket, not for taking any risk other than awarding the cup itself. So, I mean, this is not an easy situation to start making judgments on.
Mm-hmm. Well, Gao, I want your response. As president of the FIFA, Infantino said, what we Europeans have been doing for the last 3,000 years, we should be apologizing for the next 3,000 years before starting to give moral lessons. What do you make of that?
The decision was made 12 years ago. Okay, there was enough time to discuss, to debate, to argue, to appeal, even to announce a diplomatic boycott. Okay, if the countries, we saw how quickly it took them to organize a diplomatic boycott when it came to Beijing. They've done none of this. Okay, there were some NGOs that wrote reports, and there was some, but I think that the fact that everything is sort of concentrated around this point in time where the games are starting, it's sort of an attempt to spoil the dish. It's fights over prestige. As I said, jealousies. Everybody is jealous of everyone. Look, I don't want to come sound as if I'm advocating for one country or another, but let's not forget the next World Cup, okay? The 2026 World Cup will be hosted by three G20 countries: United States, Mexico, and Canada, okay? These are three very rich, very powerful. They have a lot of infrastructure already in place. None of them was willing to host this alone. They had to sort of join forces to make the collective bid. I don't know how exactly it's going to work when the cup is run in three countries in parallel, but my point is that this is a very difficult enterprise to put together, and there aren't a lot of countries that are willing to step up and take this kind of risk, and let alone find the resources to do it. It's becoming more and more difficult for countries to go for an individual bid. And if we want to see major sporting events continue, we cannot go down this road of criticizing and finding faults and finding blemishes in every country that decides to host. Otherwise, nobody will want to host, and that's not what we want. Okay, so I think it's better to just come down on the politics of it and pay more attention. Yes, to the selection process needs to be clean and transparent and everything. But once a country received the honor of and the liability and the responsibility to host a major sporting event, let's applaud them rather than finding holes and poke holes and find reasons not to celebrate them.
Mm-hmm. Oh, let's focus on the football itself, the matches and the competition. Dong Jun, speak of that, very popular culture of football, of the competitions. You can see the craziness of people coming to Qatar for the matches over there. Tell us, what is the essence of the popularity of football, the culture itself?
As a fan myself, I do see the beauty and also the glamours and those attractions of international soccer. But with the only, frustration that we have so far failed to have a national team making into the World Cup as frequently as our Korean and Japanese neighbors. And yeah, but I think for China, it would be a different perspective and attitude toward this question. It should be, how come the Chinese fans still, keep their passion about the World Cup? Given all such these failures over the years. And that's a very interesting question. I mean, different from when you ask the same question to a Japanese fan or a Saudi Arabian fan or any European or a Latin American fan, because it's interesting. China now has 3 to 4 major partner or sponsors for FIFA and the World Cup. That's more than the United States, which is also a big economic power, showing interest in the lucrative attraction the World Cup can create among its market. I think it's very interesting. I would also like to dig deeper into this by finding what's really behind those frustrated fans still follow the event, meaning they have to stay overnight for so many matches not in their time zone. And it seems that it's a very strong obsession for fans in this country.
I know prediction is a risky business. What's your favorite team, and which team will go have the last laugh? Again, Dong Jun, starting with you.
Well, I have been quite accurate predicting, if not the eventual champions, but the finalists over the last 20 years. For the sake of the development, healthy development, or long-term development of soccer, I have been hoping or supporting for a new winner of the World Cup. Every time I would hope that there is a new winner. So this time around, I am supporting the Netherlands, Belgium, or maybe Portugal. Although I, from bottom of my heart, I support England so much. I hope that they can advance into the final, but without obstructing one of the other 3 teams to win the trophy.
Yeah, Einar, what's your favorite team and the champion?
Well, given the amount of effort that's going into it, I'm not certain that they're going to win. It would be an incredible Cinderella story since they lost their first match, but I'm going to go with Qatar. I think they've shown extraordinary grit, very difficult times to go forward, and I hope they do somehow pull out a miracle and win.
Gao, what's your team?
I would go for Germany.
Okay, that's probably part of the reason, the strong attraction of football, of this competition. Well, with that, we come to the end of today's discussion. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Xinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.